Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, November 2nd. Hope everybody's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. It is in fact Wednesday, November 2nd. We are officially in November. So it should be an exciting month. We are out of October, which is always a wild, exciting month. I always say it every year. You have baseball, hockey, basketball, and football, and we still got some November baseball going on as Game 4 of the World Series will be tonight. Phillies-Astros. Last night, the Phillies poured it on. Bryce Harper with the big home run. First pitch he sees in the first inning. Takes it deep to left center field. I mean, he's on fire. I mean, he really is. And look, this series obviously isn't over. If the Astros win tonight, it's right back up to a tied-up series 2-2. And then tomorrow puts the pressure on the Phillies to win because you don't want to go back down. You don't want to go back to Houston down 3-2. That's how quickly a series can change. So you do want to make sure that the Phillies, come out tonight, play good. Because if you come out tonight and lay a dud, it almost makes tomorrow a must-win. Because if you fall down 3-2 going back to Houston, that's a really tough place to get a win. And if you win tonight, well, you're up 3-1. You got to find a way to win one game of the next three, and you will also have an opportunity tomorrow night to clinch it at home, clinch it in front of that packed Citizens Bank Park. So tonight should be a fun game. But look, again, the series isn't over, but the Phillies are just a hot team, and they're the team this postseason that they have just gotten hot, and they're just on fire, and there's really no other way to put it. They're just on fire. They're hot. They got hot at the right time, and that's what happens in the postseason. You get hot at the right time, you're going to win. I mean, it's just how it is. And for a team that barely got to the postseason, the team that, going into the final week of the season did not clinch a playoff spot, the fact that they are where they're at right now, they're just on fire. And, I mean, everything's coming together. They're pitching. They're hitting. I mean, their bats have just been unbelievable. This might be one of the greatest offenses in the postseason in a very long time. I mean, it really, in terms of just they're hitting home runs left and right. I mean, Schwarber, Hoskins, Harper, all these guys, they're just hitting bombs. They really are. So a 7-0 win. They get the touchdown last night against Houston. It's really the battle of Philly and Houston this week because you got Eagles, Texans tomorrow night, and you got Phillies, Houston, Astros obviously going on right now. So a little Philly-Houston, not really big fans of each other right now, both in the football and the baseball world. We got a lot to get to today, though, on the program. We're going to start things off with the dysfunctional Brooklyn Nets. It is embarrassing. It is a bad time to be a New York or Brooklyn Nets fan. It is really pathetic. This organization it's dysfunctional. You can officially label the Brooklyn Nets a dysfunctional, a train wreck, a pathetic organization because where they currently stand right now with the players on the roster and with their coaching situation and everything else about this team, there is a lot of issues, and a lot of them are internally, and that's a problem. The Nets do fire Steve Nash, which I believe is a good thing. But man, oh man, there's a lot of bigger problems on this team. We're really going to get into it. We'll also get to the NFL trade deadline. I'll give you my thoughts on the Jets and Giants not doing a whole lot. Jets obviously trading for James Robinson, after the Breece Hall injury, which was last week. And then, the Giants kind of stayed put. The only thing that they did was get rid of Kadarius Toney and got some picks back. So Giants didn't do a ton, but look, I'll tell you why I'm okay with that. If you're a Giants fan, I understand you want a receiver, but I'll tell you why it's not the end of the world if you're a New York Giants fan, the fact that you didn't get a receiver. Because, look, they're following their path. I'd rather not do anything at the trade deadline than go out and do what the Chicago Bears did, where they sold away some really good pieces like Roquan Smith, but yet they traded for a receiver. And I'm blanking on the receiver that Chase Claypool. Right? It just doesn't make sense. Like, they gave away some really good players, but they got a receiver in return. Like, what are you doing there? Are you buying? Are you selling? Are you competing? Are you not? Are you in? Are you not? Like, what's the deal there? Jets made a trade yesterday. They gave away Jacob Martin and a 5th-round pick. They get a 4th-round pick in return, so kind of just a salary dump. You're going to see a lot more Jermaine Johnson and Bryce Huff at the edge spot. We're deep at the position. Not a huge deal, but a deal that, makes sense, just for roster spots and, cap space and all that stuff. So With all that being said, a lot to get to today on the podcast. Rangers get the big win as well last night. They'll have a day off today, along with the Nets having a day off today and also have a day off tomorrow. Much needed 2 days off. This team needs a break. This organization right now is dysfunctional. With that being said, this is the Bubbs on Sports podcast, and let's get into it. So we're going to start off today with a little bit of basketball, and like I mentioned, we'll get to the NFL trade deadline and the Jets and the Giants, and really what was one of the craziest trade deadlines I've ever seen. You always go into the trade deadline. I always say this, and I'll get to Steve Nash in a second, but just this in general, like you always go into the trade deadline every year where it's like the NFL trade deadline is always a little different than the MLB because MLB, NBA, and all those other trade deadlines, it's easier to just get inserted into a team. Like for the NFL, you got to learn the playbook. You got to the whole. It's like it's just it's also just different. Like it's just. A lot less games. You got to learn the playbook. It's kind of tough, right? It's just different than trade deadline in the MLB or any of the other sports where you're playing every day or playing every other day. But yesterday there was a ton of action and a lot of big names. A lot of big names were on the move yesterday and even days prior. So we'll get into all that. But I want to start off today with Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets. As we get the news yesterday that the New York Nets. Jeez, what am I doing here? The Brooklyn Nets, keep calling them New York, but the Brooklyn Nets parted ways with head coach Steve Nash after a 2-5 start to the season. Jack Vaughn took over last night. They took the loss against the Chicago Bulls. So they are now 2-6, but 2-5 under Steve Nash. They're now 0-1 as with Vaughn as the interim. And they're 2-6 now overall on the season, and it's bad. And look, we get this news yesterday, and I wouldn't say it's definitely surprising. I think all of us as Net fans were all kind of pushing for it. Look, Steve Nash was not a good coach, and you could sit here and say, oh, we went 94-67, and we got to the Eastern Conference semifinals, and we're getting to the postseason. But in reality, things got real rough last year, where you had the Rocky season. KD hurt. You had the whole James Harden, situation. You had the whole unvaccinated status with Kyrie Irving. You go into the offseason, and, Kevin Durant requests a trade. You hear the rumors that Kyrie Irving might be on his way out. Kevin Durant doesn't want to come back unless if Steve Nash is gone as the head coach and Sean Marks is gone as the GM. Then they find a way to resolve the situation. Kevin Durant's back with the team, and it's like here we stand now. They're 2-6, and they get rid of Steve Nash. So my first thoughts are, look, it had to be done. And I just gave you the whole list of things that have happened really over the course of the last year, and it's really been less than a year. It was ever since that playoff exit against the Milwaukee Bucks at home, Game 7, where everything went haywire. Because that next season, it was an awful season. Kyrie being unvaccinated. The whole Kevin Durant, being hurt for part of it. That whole 11-12 game losing streak. James Harden, and his laziness and the whole James Harden issue. All of that stuff accumulated really into this. But Steve Nash had to go because he just wasn't a good coach. His time management was terrible. His rotations were awful. The players started to kind of stop playing for him. Like, the defense has been bad. You see a lot of laziness, not much competitive play. And I get it's the NBA. And look, there's not much defense to begin with in the NBA, but it seemed it was just flat under Steve Nash. It just really wasn't good. His rotations, his plays, all that stuff. He just wasn't good. He was overwhelmed. And he really wasn't the right coach he was too much of a player's coach for a locker room that has a lot of egos. This is a Net locker room, and this is the risk you take of building a super team. When you bring in these different egos, bring in these different big names, and you hope it works. Again, I always say this about super teams. It is a very high risk. Your high risk is, this happening, where it's blowing up right in your face. You got to fire the coach. You got Kyrie Irving, an absolute mess mentally. You have Kevin Durant, who's playing good, but he's got no help because Ben Simmons is embarrassing. He's not any good. He does not look like the same player he once was. And then you really have a roster around them that's all right. Patty Mills is Joe Harris is. I would still like to see him recover his three-point form that what it once was. He's not quite to where it used to be. The 2021 postseason seemed like it kind of really got messed up. Yuta Watanabe has been pretty good. Seth Curry's been in and out of the lineup with the injury. Royce O'Neal's been okay. Your perimeter defense has been atrocious. Your paint defense has been terrible. It just hasn't been good. And he just wasn't the right guy for it. And the Nets need to find the next head coach needs to be a guy that can find a way to manage these egos, find a way to take control of the locker room. Steve Nash had zero control of that locker room. You knew he had zero control when you hear, Kyrie, who's a complete loser, go out and say, "Oh, it's a collaborative effort." Like, you knew right then and there, he did not have control of the locker room. And you hear the quotes from him, what he said to Sean Marks, like the players aren't responding to what he's saying. And this was a mutual agreement. Steve Nash mutually agreed with Sean Marks to break away, move on from each other. Steve Nash was tired of it. I bet you he probably feels very relieved. Sources say he feels very relieved that he really didn't want to be the head coach anymore. He was kind of sick and tired of all the drama, all the nonsense, and everything that he was kind of saying was, players just weren't taking in. He wasn't good. He was not a good coach, but there was also the side of it where it just wasn't meant to be in a way where, the guy, they just did not respond to him. It just wasn't meant to be. But Steve Nash, it was bad. It was a bad tenure where it was awful. It was a bad tenure for the head coach. And really what, to kind of boil it down, was a lot of drama, not much success. You won one playoff round, and now you're on to a different coach. You beat the you beat the Celtics back in 2021. You lost to the Bucks, and you get swept against Boston last year. That was his tenure. 1-2 in playoff series, getting swept last season, a drama-filled offseason. Steve Nash is out as head coach, and now who takes over? Well, the front runner it seems right now is Ime Udoka, which, look, he's a great coach, very good basketball coach, but he's got problems. He had the whole suspension issue and the behind-the-scenes stuff, the allegations against him in Boston where they had to suspend him and they haven't fully released all the details, and he's got issues. So from a basketball standpoint, he's an excellent coach, and you saw what he did to that Boston Celtics team. He took that team from possibly getting broken up from an embarrassing start to the season to going all the way to the NBA Finals, obviously losing to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, but still taking a team that was embarrassing to start the year and turning them into a legit team offensively and defensively. And the Jets need a type of coach, or the Nets need a type of coach like that. They need a type of coach that can shore up this defense, can get the guys to compete, and offensively can have a little bit of rhythm. Because there's no rhythm with this offense. Let's just tell it like it is. It's Kevin Durant posting up and shooting a step back floater, or it's Kyrie Irving dribbling 20 of the 24 seconds off the shot clock and then shooting up a three-pointer, or him driving to the net, getting fouled, going to line, or passing it to Ben Simmons just so that he could pass up a wide open shot. There's no rhythm. Every once in a while, you'll get a little bit of a rhythm where you get a little, a screen, a pick and roll, dribble on the opposite end, go with the left, go up with the right. You sometimes see a little bit of that stuff, but not much. And the interior defense is terrible. I mean, it's awful. I mean, outside of Nick Claxton at times, there's really nobody there. And we don't get rebounds. We get dominated. We do not get defensive rebounds. There's so many second chance opportunities for the opposing team. I can't tell you the amount of time, and maybe the numbers say otherwise. But watching that Pacers game on Saturday night when the Nets lost, because obviously they beat them on Monday night, but that Saturday night game what they lost, and the Pacers lit them up from three. Number one, they were lighting them up from three because the Nets were giving them free shots. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton was just chucking them up. It's like, can somebody guard him? Luka the other day against the Mavericks. Patty Mills was struggling against Luka. They put Watanabe on him. He was struggling against him. Mix it up, change, do something. They were giving Luka, they were just like, okay, here, shoot the ball. This is shoot around. I mean, that's what teams basically are right now. Zach LaVine last night had that stretch in the fourth quarter where he was just knocking down shots left and right. And they're all from three. They're all from deep. The three-point shot kills you in the NBA if you cannot cover it. And the Nets have zero answers right now. Zero. And they look lazy. They look lazy. They really do. Nobody on the perimeter. So you need a coach that can try and shore that up. And Steve Nash wasn't shoring that up because, again, the players had they didn't respect him. They didn't listen to what he's saying. You need a coach that's going to come in, have a voice in the locker room, and change things. And it's possible. You can do it with super teams. You can. Coaches can make an impact. Now, I always say this. Coaches in NBA make the least, I don't know if I want to call it the least amount of impact, but you could have a star-studded coach. If the players aren't going to listen, they're not going to listen. In other sports, coaches are huge because it's more game planning. In the NBA, you can have an average coach. LeBron James, he could carry a team. But again, coaching does matter at times because, especially for this net team, they need a voice in that locker room. There's really no voice right now. There is none. You need a voice. You need a guy that's going to hold players accountable. You need a guy that is going to go out, shore up the defense, rhythm on the offense, use everybody to his advantage. Where's Cam Thomas? Where is he? He's young, second year. Patty Mills was a nice addition all last year, and sure he can play a little. His defense has been terrible. Sure he could shoot a little bit, which hasn't been very good. He really hasn't been playing well to start this year. Why don't you put Cam Thomas in? See what you got in him. Try something, mix something up. It's the same garbage every night. There's just no rhythm, no flow to this team. There isn't. And that's why they're 2-6. And let's be real here, that's why the Lakers aren't playing very well either. It's LeBron and AD just passing it back and forth, pass it back and forth, up, shoot it. And that's what it is. It's and I don't watch the Lakers a ton, obviously, being an East Coast sports fan and, them being all the way out on the West Coast in LA, but, I mean, come on now. It's embarrassing. The Nets are pathetic. So, you get rid of Nash. Ime Udoka is an option, which, again, basketball standpoint would be the best option. But from a off-the-field standpoint, off-the-court standpoint, he's got issues. And he's got some allegations. And the biggest thing to me is this. If the Brooklyn Nets hire Ime Udoka, there better be a more investigations as to what went on in Boston with the allegations. Because if there isn't a deeper investigation and because it obviously tells you, Ime Udoka was phenomenal last year as a coach. Phenomenal. He took that Boston team from being an embarrassment to being a team that a lot of people were saying, a lot of people at the beginning of the season were actually saying fire Udoka, but he took that team, they were thinking about breaking up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. He took that team all the way to the NBA Finals. And it wasn't luck. It was adjustments, and it was shoring up the defense and making that offense have flow and using Tatum, Brown, everybody on that team to the best of their ability. That's what he did. He got the best. He got everything out of each player, which the Nets aren't doing. I could give you 1,000,001 different things the Nets could do to get to have more of a flow. They're not doing it right now because they're just not. It's almost like they're selfish. They stick to the same players night in, night out. You don't see anybody else. You don't see any lineup changes. But that's where we're at. That's where we stand right now. That's the risk you take. This roster is bleak, very bleak. It is. Outside of Kevin Durant, Kyrie is awful, and I'll get to his. He's a train wreck, and to me, you got to trade Kyrie Irving. You have to, and I'll say that right now. So we move on from the coaching. Now you go to the players. You gotta trade. If I'm the Brooklyn Nets right now, and if I'm Sean Marks, and I know you hear rumors of, Ben Simmons possibly being in conversations, which I think Ben Simmons and Kyrie both could be traded. Ben Simmons has been awful, and Kyrie Irving's off the field stuff is just terrible. It's sad, it's pathetic, and it's really just embarrassing, and it's hurtful. And the fact that the Nets are just letting this slide, the fact that the Nets are just letting this happen, the NBA, Adam Silver's just letting all of this stuff that Kyrie's doing happen is just ridiculous. If I'm the Brooklyn Nets, after watching that game last night, after watching Kyrie Irving completely embarrass himself last night, which he does oftentimes, you got to get rid of Kyrie Irving. You have to trade him. You have to. Send a message. Enough of his garbage. Enough of him not being available. He played 20 games in 2019-2020. He played 54 games in the 2020-2021 season. He played 29 games last year, and he's played all 8 so far this season, which is, a shock. He hasn't even sniffed playing 70 games as a Brooklyn Net. The most games he's played in a season, 54 with the Nets. He's not reliable. I mean, he seems like he's losing it. He's mentally crazy, and I'm saying that. And hey, if I'm being hurtful, I don't care. He is. He's crazy. He's crazy. These things that he's, these things that he's, I'm sure you already know. These things that he's posting on social media. It's just terrible. And the fact that the Nets and the NBA is letting this go without disciplining him, I mean, I know you hear a possible suspension. There should be more than a suspension. I mean, this is a guy that's he's just messed up. He is. You got to trade Kyrie Irving. You have to. And he's clearly not focused on basketball either. He doesn't care about basketball. He's worried about all the other stuff. He's not going to care about basketball. He only cares about all these other, stuff is all this other crazy stuff that's really hurtful to many. And I don't want to go into details. I try to keep this podcast just strictly sports. You can find the details if you like, and that's another thing with the whole Udoka thing, is all the allegations in Boston. If you bring him in, you already have Kyrie Irving with what he's posting, which is completely just upsetting. To have those two in the locker room could really create what is already a toxic environment even more toxic. Kyrie Irving's head's not in basketball. It's not. Watch him last night. Kyrie Irving last night, I'll tell you this, that was just like watching James Harden last year against the Sacramento Kings. Just like watching it. It literally was. And I actually today, because I was interested, I looked at the numbers. James Harden last year against the Kings and Kyrie Irving last night against the Bulls. Because they're all you remember. James Harden last year when he had that 4-point game against the Sacramento Kings and then got traded a couple days later. That was like the end of it. Like, he was lazy, he didn't want to be here anymore. That was the end of it. Last night, Kyrie Irving, in a way, actually had some of the worst numbers. He had played 33 minutes. He went 2 of 12 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3. He had 4 points, 7 of 6, 6 rebounds, 4 points. He scored 4 points. I mean, just embarrassing. Really is embarrassing, and really it's pathetic. And he needs to go. Kyrie Irving needs to go. The Nets need to say enough of tolerating all this stuff off the field. Go somewhere else. Be toxic. Be a head case in the locker room somewhere else. Move on. Get pieces for him and move on. And to be honest, you could say the same thing about Ben Simmons. I know it's only, 7 games into his net career, but he doesn't look any good either. Ben Simmons looks nothing like what he used to be 6 games into his Nets career. He looks nothing like he used to be. He's not. He's scared to shoot. He passes up open shots. He's just not good. He really isn't. And, so far this year he's averaging 6 points a game. I mean, in his career, he's a 15-point per game guy. He's just not playing well. He's just not. He's another guy, too, that last season sat out, not the same. And you wonder, too, how much is his head really in it? How much does he really care? Because last season during the postseason, he was dressing up like a clown sitting on the bench. How much did he really care? He could have played. He could have tried to fight through the injury, but he didn't. So how much? So you have Kyrie Irving, who's just a complete, it's just pathetic. And then Ben Simmons, who you question him too. You also question just his overall talent. He's not playing good. So, and it's Kevin Durant. So if I'm the Nets, if I'm Sean Marks, you hire a new coach. And what doesn't make sense to me is why they even brought Steve Nash back, because they're doing everything backwards is really what they're doing. Because you should have fired Steve Nash in the offseason so that you could have brought in a new head coach, let him decide the pieces that he wants to have a part of this team. Put his scheme and put his whole things on defense and offense in place so the Nets could learn it and really just form that kind of identity. Now you got to find a way that do that during the season. You got to find a way to build an identity, build a culture, build a scheme offensively and defensively, on the run here. It just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. And to Steve Nash too, like, if you really didn't want to come back, you should have said something at the beginning of the year. If you really were sick and tired of it, you should have said something. I mean, what else do you expect? It's the Brooklyn Nets. Yeah, Kyrie's on the roster. I mean, anytime he goes anywhere, the place, it's a dumpster fire. Ever since he left Cleveland, everything that he touches just burns. Let's just tell it like it is. He's a mess in the locker room. He's a toxic guy in the locker room. He divides the locker room, clearly. And clearly when he's out there, his head's not even focused on basketball. Because you saw last night. That was one of the most lamest performances I've ever seen. Lazy performances. Discipline. He's gotta be disciplined. I mean, he obviously doesn't care. So this is where we stand with the Nets. It's dysfunctional. It's embarrassing. I feel for KD a little bit because as much as people want to crush Kevin Durant is the last of the problems here. He's the last of it. People love to crush Kevin Durant. They love to. They love to crush him. Kevin Durant has nothing to do really with. I mean, look, I know. Maybe I should take that back. I understand in the offseason he had all those trade requests, but in terms of performance, Durant's going out there and playing well. Kyrie Irving played like garbage last night. Ben Simmons looks lost. Kevin Durant's doing his thing. He's got no help. And Kevin Durant was also right. He said to fire Steve Nash. He didn't want to come back because of Steve Nash. Where do we stand now? 8 games in, and Nets are searching for a head coach. I mean, it's embarrassing. It really is. So this super team thing has just been awful. It's getting worse and worse, and there's just no energy. I mean, I'll tell you what. Whoever comes here, they got a lot on their plate because they got to turn around a lot. They do. I mean, it's a mess. It is a mess. It really is. So that's what I got for the Brooklyn mess. And yes, I meant to call them the Brooklyn mess because they are a mess. They'll be back in action on Friday against the Wizards. Their schedule doesn't get any easier, I'll tell you that for sure. They got the Wizards coming up on the road. They got the Hornets. They got the Mavericks. Then they got the Knicks. Then the Clippers, Lakers, who aren't very good. But then the Kings, Trailblazers, who are good. A lot of road games coming up. They also have a West Coast trip, and I'll tell you that. West Coast trips are always tough. No matter which way you put it, West Coast trips are always, always difficult. So no matter who you're playing on the West Coast trip, it's always difficult. A very odd schedule. They go on the road for 3 games, and they come home to play the Knicks for 1 game, and they go on the road to a West Coast trip. And then, after the West Coast trip, they come home for 1 game, and they go on the road again for 3. This schedule is very weird for the Nets. Not many home games at all in November. They got 3 on the road, then they come home. Then it's 4 out west, then they come home for 1. Then it's 3 on the road, and then they finally come home again. They have 3, 4, 5, 6 home games, 5 home games left. They have 15 games left. In November combined, including last night's game, they got 10 road games and 6 home games. So not many home games at all for the Brooklyn Nets. Not many at all. A lot of road games. Although they'll have 3 home games to end November, and then go into December, they'll have a big 7-game homestand. After that. So then they'll have a lot more home games. But very odd. When you look at their schedule, and I got to move on here, but very odd that they put 1 home game in between a West Coast trip. Usually, you kind of have a homestand, and then you head out west, and then you come back. The fact that they're on the road, come back home for 1, then go out west, I don't know. Maybe it makes sense. It just doesn't make sense. They're out in Dallas, play the Mavericks, then they got to come all the way back just so they can go all the way out to L.A., play the Clippers and the Lakers back-to-back Saturday, Sunday. So, it'll be interesting. I don't know. It's just not good right now. Not good at all. So, now we move on to the NFL trade deadline. Try to be a little bit short and sweet with this here, as neither of the local teams did a ton yesterday. And here's my deal. You obviously have the whole Bradley Chubb stuff, which was obviously a big deal. A good move for the Dolphins. They bring in a high-end pass rusher. You heard that the Jets were, obviously, the rumors were the Jets might have been involved. I wouldn't have given off a first for him. Look, Bradley Chubb's a great player. He's injury-prone. He hasn't played a full season ever in his career. He hasn't played a full season. So, I believe, or maybe he only did it in his rookie year. But he doesn't play a ton. He's out a lot. Now, he has played the most of this season, but he's injury-prone, but he's a great player. And the Dolphins are getting an extremely good pass rusher. I was never for getting Bradley Chubb. Look, my only thing that I said, and I was talking to somebody the other day, is if the Nets could have, or if not the Nets, if the Jets could have found a way, and again, Elijah Moore, Joe Douglas said yesterday that they fielded calls, but they didn't want to trade him, and there weren't any plans to trade him. But if the Nets could have found a way, or the Jets, I'm all over with the Nets. If the Jets could have found a way to package a deal with Elijah Moore and draft picks and get Bradley Chubb and Jerry Jeudy back, I would have been all for that. Or Elijah Moore and another player and get Chubb and Jeudy, or Elijah Moore and picks and get Jeudy. Because you heard that Jerry Jeudy was possibly on the market. I don't know how much truth to those rumors. He obviously is still a Denver Bronco today, along with Cortland Sutton too, another guy that kind of popped up a little bit in trade rumors. Again, I think that win against Jacksonville changed their perspective because look, they're 3-5. They're just a 2-game. They win the next 2 games, they're right back up to 500. Things get interesting. Now, if they lose to Jacksonville that week, they're 2-6, and the season's getting at hand. That's how much one game can mean. Make a difference from where teams stand on a week by week basis. But that was my only way, is if they found a way to get more packaged picks and got Jeudy and Chubb. Only thing I would have done. Other than that, I wasn't really for going for Bradley Chubb because look, he's a great player, but he is injury prone, and we were already deep at the position. As a matter of fact, we had to trade a guy in Jacob Martin to save some cap space, who we signed to a 3-year deal because we just didn't need him. And with Jermaine Johnson coming back healthy now, Bryce Huff's been phenomenal, played very well on Sunday. We don't really need it. And they also come at a cheaper cost, and they're all younger. So I'm okay with the Jets kind of staying put. They did make their one trade, giving away Jacob Martin, like I mentioned. They got a 4th-round pick in return, which actually isn't bad because Jacob Martin, I'm not saying he's played bad. He hasn't really he hasn't made much of an impact because he hasn't been out there a ton. But to get a 4th-round pick for him is actually not bad. And you did give up a 5th-round pick, which definitely, could have boosted up the 4th-round pick a little bit because you had to give up the 5th. But 4th-round pick's not bad. It really isn't. There's some guys in the 4th round that you could definitely get. Now, I would have thought personally, and again, they give up a 5th-round pick, so that could have, kind of upped the value a little bit on the pick that the Broncos gave back. But, and it's not a bad move for the Broncos either, because now they have a whole edge. Jacob Martin's a solid player. He is solid. He's not phenomenal. He'll be a solid veteran, for them, a lower cost, considering they've got some big contracts on the roster. Cough, cough, Russell Wilson. But he fills that void too with Bradley Chubb going to Miami. But and now for the AFC East, look, there's a lot of really good edge rushers in the AFC. So you got Von Miller, you got Bradley Chubb, you got Matt Judon, you got Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff. A lot of good talent on these defensive lines for the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Patriots. And obviously with that move of Bradley Chubb, it makes it even bigger in terms of the amount of talent in the at the edge spot in the AFC East, where the quarterbacks, it's funny, the quarterbacks are kind of, you have Josh Allen is very good, Tua's had a good year, Mac Jones and Zach Wilson are still question marks. So edge is definitely a little bit more of a consistent there. But people have to realize too, the Jets went out and got James Robinson. That is a solid trade deadline move. I would like to see more of him this week. I hope they utilize him more this week. I think they will, considering he's going to have a full week of practice under the belt to learn the playbook. I think you'll see a lot more of him. But as for the Giants, look, the Giants, they stayed put. And, I know a lot of Giants fans wanted to see, I know a lot of Giants fans wanted to see a trade, bring in a receiver, whether that was a Brandon Cooks, whether that was a, I don't know, anybody out there. Brandon Cooks, I know some people heard the rumors of Jerry Jeudy fly around. Jerry Jeudy was a big name, very big name on the trade market. And I'm sure a lot of teams called. His asking price was probably too big. 3rd-year receiver with a ton of talent. That would have been a big move for the Giants, but Brandon Cooks was the big one. And I'm actually shocked in a way that Brandon Cooks got traded away because it's almost like he requested a trade. Houston's terrible. Davis Mills isn't any good. He's kind of expressed his frustrations via social media and kind of just via what he said to the organization and a lot of things he said, but they still didn't get rid of him. So, we'll see how the rest of the season plays out with Brandon Cooks in Houston and the Texans team that's been awful this season. But I'm okay with the Giants staying put. Now, look, they got rid of Kadarius Toney, and they got draft picks back. And I know a lot of Giants fans didn't like that. Personally, I think that was a perfect move. I do. Again, Joe Shane and Brian Dable. Who drafted him? Dave Gettleman. What are Joe Shane and Brian Dable doing? They're undoing what Gettleman did, right? And Kadarius Toney too. a lot of Giants fans loved Kadarius Toney, and I never understood why. I understand he was quick. I understand he had a lot of talent. I understand last season, like in that Cowboys game, he showed flashes of what he can do, and he definitely could be a talented receiver in this league. I don't know how much looks he'll get in Kansas City, but I guess we'll see. Kadarius Toney, like that trade, I actually didn't. I thought that was good. They got picks for a guy that played 2 games this year, for a guy that's been hurt a lot, and for a guy that really didn't fit in the offensive scheme. And clearly, Brian Daboll and Joe Shane didn't really need on their roster, and they didn't pick him. That was a Dave Gettleman investment. So I have no issue with that. And the Giants stayed put at the deadline, and I also don't have any issue with that. Look, Dave Gettleman and Brian and Joe Shane are doing the right thing. I understand they're 6-2. I understand you know your receiver, but obviously what you got is working. And this season, the goal is obviously to build an identity, and you do want to win. But Super Bowl's not on the radar. Playoffs definitely should be on the radar now. I mean, if you don't make the playoffs, that's an ultimate collapse. If you win, you'd have to go 2-7 on the way out here, 2-6 on the way out. The rest of the way here, in order to finish below 500, they're gonna finish 9-10 wins. They might even get to the 11-win mark. They're at 6 wins already. They got a lot of winnable games coming out of the bye week, the rest of the season too. So the Giants are gonna be a postseason team, I think. I mean, they'd have to really collapse, but they're keeping their eye on the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is building for next year, and not trying to go all in on this season. Realizing that your cap situation isn't very good, realizing that, any draft picks you got, you want to take advantage of. The Giants inherited a mess. They inherited a mess. Dave Gettleman left Joe Shane and Brian Daboll a mess. Not much cap space. Draft picks, not much. And the Giants are trying to undo that. And Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are doing a great job of that so far, and they need to continue. So it's smart, because I'll tell you what, Giants fans, you're going to, down the road, when you're winning a lot of games and you're doing great things, you're going to, not that you're going to fully remember this, but a trade deadline where you could have gave up many more pieces for another receiver, it's the smarter move to avoid it. It's the smarter move. Again, big picture. Think big picture. I know you want to think right now and be like, 6-2, and you want to have kind of these glasses on where you can only focus on this season, but big picture. And the big picture is you're still building for the future. And it's not worth it going out, bringing in a big-name guy, giving up a lot of picks away for a guy that, contract situation, cap space, it just doesn't work out. So I'm okay with what the Giants did. And obviously what's working. Again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, it is kind of broke, but Giants are going with where they're at. And again, you have to realize, too, Sterling Shepard tore his ACL. So if he comes back next season, and he's very injury-prone, do you rely on him? But it's going to be interesting. It really will be. So, Jets, Giants, quiet at the actual deadline. Jets make a move. Giants make a move, getting rid of Toney. Jets bring in Robinson. Jets also stood pat on the offensive line. Similar to the Giants' perspective, I think it would have been a little bit too much to bring in like a Conklin, maybe a little bit too much to bring in a Tunsil. I mean, you're talking about 2 very good offensive linemen. Although they would have been huge boosts to this team, I think the way the Jets and Joe Douglas look at it as George Fant and Max Mitchell are coming back soon, and they're kind of your acquisitions, they're kind of your upgrades. So that's how I kind of see it. They're getting healthier, they're going to roll with that. So we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. And, what's interesting, and I still wonder this. I wonder what the best deal was. Because, Douglas said yesterday that many teams called on Elijah Moore, but he was always going to be a New York Jet. I wonder what the best deal was, like what teams are willing to offer. I really do. I really do wonder. And I wonder what teams called up. You can't sit here and tell me the Packers did not call up Joe Douglas. The fact that the Packers didn't get a receiver, I mean, they're basically asking to lose, and they're asking Aaron Rodgers to, throw a fit. They refuse to address the receivers. They refuse to. Why did they not go out and get and the Packers, they're in a situation where you go out, you pay a high price. Because it's towards the end of Rodgers' career. Once he's out, you really don't know how much winning you can do. You can try to find a way to win now, and if you can do that, you go out and get the picks. You go out and you not get the picks. You go out and you bring in guys. That's what the Rams did. They kind of They felt like, look, we got a roster now that can do well. Let's bring in more talent, win a championship. And they did that. Right? So the Packers just don't do that. It's just, it's poorly run in Green Bay. It really is. And I don't know. The more and more you look at this, the more and more I wonder how in the world Aaron Rodgers comes back next year. Because they're not drafting a receiver because they don't do that either. So it's a mess in Green Bay. It really is. And they're not winning. The one thing I'd say about the Giants, which is different, it would be one thing if the Giants were like 3-5, or like 3-5 or 4-4, and they had no receivers. Then you could probably say, look, we got to bring in receivers. We got to get guys. Or if you're the 5-3, but they're 6-2, they're winning games. And they're not losing. Their games that they're losing aren't because it kind of was because of Richie James, but offensively, it's not always. Actually, it's been Daniel Jones in the offense that's been winning games for them. But the Packers just refuse to address the receivers, and when you're at the tail end of Rodgers' career, where he's given you everything he's got left in the tank, you got to take it. You got to find a way to do everything you can to build around him and win one more time with him. So they refuse to do it. So it's definitely interesting. But we'll finish things off here today with the New York Sports Update and the rest of the sports on tonight. You got Phillies-Astros tonight, 8:03 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Game 4, Christian Javier versus Aaron Nola. Citizens Bank Park should be a lot of fun. 2 hockey games on tonight, Maple Leafs-Flyers and the Sabres-Penguins. And as for the NBA, you got Sixers-Wizards, Celtics-Cavs, Hawks-Knicks, Kings-Heat, Clippers-Rockets, Hornets-Bulls, Pistons-Bucks, Raptors-Spurs, Jazz-Mavericks, Grizzlies-Trailblazers, and the Pelicans-Lakers. So that's that. And, as for fantasy basketball right now, for categories, I'm currently 2-0, but the categories, obviously, you have 8 categories. And if you're a fan of fantasy basketball. So I'm 2-0 in fantasy basketball. And, fantasy football. I've been discussing some trades, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this trade. I asked somebody to make this trade today, and looking at the numbers, it was 82 in my favor, 78 in the opponent's. So I would have technically won the trade by like 4 points. They do it on a scale like 100. So it would have been like a C+ trade for I would have benefited like 4 points plus, like in terms of like I would have benefited more. But I offered the trade to somebody, and I need a running back in one of my leagues. And my running backs right now are Dalvin Cook, Dave Montgomery, Michael Carter. And my bench running back, and my only one, is Devin Singletary because Dobbins is on the IR now. So I was looking for a running back, and somebody offered me Kadarius Toney, Ezekiel Elliott for Michael Carter. And I wasn't giving that up because I need to get Elliott's on a bye. He's out right now. And Kadarius Toney's useless on my roster. I don't need him. My receivers really aren't the problem. So I offered him in back Michael. I offered him Devin Singletary and Adam Thielen, and for Miles Sanders and Tyler Lockett. Now it is asking for a lot, but I am giving him Adam Thielen, and he needs a receiver, and or he doesn't really need he doesn't really need much. His receivers are good, but I gave him Thielen, who would be better than the receivers, some of the depth guys that he's already got. And I also giving him a running back in which is better than his number 2 running back. But it doesn't look like he accepted the trade. So I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on that trade. I would have gave him Devin Singletary, and I would have given him Adam Thielen. Now I thought about giving up David Montgomery. My only issue is David Montgomery. If I would have given him up, I would have gotten back Miles Sanders. But how much am I really helping my running back? Because then it's still Miles Sanders. Devin Singletary's. I'm kind of looking to get rid of him. Like, he's good, but he's not really has a place on my roster because Michael Carter, I think, is getting a lot more looks. And now with Nyheim Hines there, you wonder really how much. Like, I'm trying to get the most out of Singletary. Like, today I've been looking at a lot of trades, like, because I think Hines and him are going to start to split a little bit more maybe, and you wonder how much value you're going to be able to get out of him in the next couple weeks. But I don't want to give up Carter because Carter's the number 1 back now with the Jets. And I'm cautiously optimistic that hopefully they can try to get this run game back into a rhythm starting this week, and he could play well, and he could have a couple big weeks. So I don't want to give him up because it's almost like trading a number 1 running back. Now, Singletary is a number 1, but he's not nearly as much impactful as a Carter could be because they passed the ball a ton in Buffalo, and they got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Right? So It's interesting, but I would have got, maybe I'm asking for too much, but his receivers are good. Like, his receivers are really good. Like, I mean, you know what's funny is Tyler Lockett's one of his worst receivers. Like, when you look at his receivers, it's Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, and then it's Tyler Lockett. So it's like, do I go Amari Cooper? But Amari Cooper's had a very good season, and including he's had a very good week, very good season. He's had 4 weeks of 20-plus points, including back-to-back weeks, or including actually, to give you more expanded, 5 of the 8 games this season he scored a touchdown. And in 3 of the 8 games, he's had over 100 yards. So, I mean, he's had a very good year. He has. And he's 8th position ranking. He's averaging 15.3 points. So, like, he's a guy I wouldn't look to trade for. That's why I look for Lockett. Because Lockett's been good, not nearly as consistent, though. Lockett hasn't been as consistent. He kind of has been, actually, when you look at the numbers. But he hasn't scored many touchdowns. The thing with Lockett, he gets a lot of catches. 9, 6, 5, 7. He gets a ton of catches. 7 points. Like the 1 week, he had 6 catches for 91 yards. 13 points right there. He didn't score a touchdown, but he gets a ton of catches. Amari Cooper, not as many catches, just more yards, big gains, and a lot more touchdowns. Tyler Lockett scored 3 touchdowns this year. He's had 300-yard games. I mean, there's been games where, boom, right here, 76 yards. He had 9 catches, though, so 16 points. He gets a ton of catches. Very good, and one of Geno Smith's favorite targets. So, I'm looking to get a trade. I need to make a trade because I'm 2-7, and in order to find a way to look, I'm 2-6 rather. My season's basically over, but I need to find a way to get somebody at running back because my running backs are thin. Dave Montgomery's all right. I'm still waiting on Michael Carter, and Devin Singletary's very inconsistent. So that's why I'm hoping to get rid of Singletary. Like when he's good, when he's on, he's one of the better he's one of the more underrated fantasy running backs out there. You just don't know when he's gonna be on. And I got Thielen, who's actually been more consistent. Thielen, he's actually been a little bit more consistent recently. He had the bye week, but not including the bye week, he 4 of his last 5 weeks he's had over 10 points. So he's been a lot more consistent recently. 18-15. He did have 6, but 15-12. So he's been a lot more consistent. He's been usually very inconsistent. Usually he'll have like 1 week where he puts up 20 points and then 5 points. But recently it's been 18-15. He did have that one back week that was 6, but then it's 15-12. So he's putting up for the last 5 weeks. He's been a lot more consistent. And I thought maybe they would, buy into that. Again, he doesn't need receivers. That's the thing. So I figured if I give him Thielen and I'm giving him a running back in Devin Singletary where he also Chubb and Elliott. Chubb's out and Elliott's on a bye. Elliott very well could be back next week. Chubb is on a bye. So, you're not going to need Tyler Algier, whatever his name is. You put Chubb in, then you have Elliott, and then you don't need to worry about flex running back because you have Hopkins. And then Singletary could be a good backup. Singletary is better than Algier. Singletary would be a better option this week than Algier would be because Singletary is just better. So, I know you might not want to hear that, but that's my fantasy football. It's not a rant, but it's just like, I thought it was a good trade. Maybe I need to give up David Montgomery, but I don't know if maybe I will give up David Montgomery. Or, he first offered me Michael Carter, so maybe he wants Michael Carter. I'd be more willing to give up David Montgomery before I give up Michael Carter. I would give up David Montgomery. Call me biased, but I think also I just would be, I don't know. I just think Michael Carter has more of a chance of playing well the rest of the season than David Montgomery. He's also more of a threat out of the backfield passing game if Wilson can make an accurate pass more than 3 yards, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, that will do it for the podcast here today. Enjoy Game 4 of the World Series. Got a lot of hockey and basketball on as well. By the way, my game pick for tomorrow night, completely forgot. Thursday Night Football tomorrow night. I'm taking the Eagles, and I'm going to take the Eagles. I'll make my game pick right now. I forgot to do that. I'm 7-1 so far this season on Thursday Night Game Picks, so looking to keep it up. Eagles, Texans tomorrow night. Eagles are 14-point favorites. They come into the game 7-0. Texans are 1-5-1. The over-under set at 45, 8:15 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Amazon Prime Video. According to this, 97% of people in the Eagles will win. I'm going to take Philly. I'm going to say they get to 8-0. Give me the Eagles, 31-10. I'll take the under and the over 45, and then the Eagles cover the 14. Eagles get the road win. That's my pick for tomorrow night. And that will do it. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.